All right, so let's talk a little bit about the day of the damn race. Going into it. So as I mentioned in an earlier video, this was a 240-mile race across the state of Minnesota. It started at midnight. I think there's around 200 to 300 riders. Yeah, so we got kicked off at nighttime. We had cue sheets for our navigation, so no GPS was allowed for this race. And then we had 3 designated stops that we can meet with our crew to refuel on water, food, and such. So I really didn't know anyone going into this race. So I just kicked off, and now I wanted to be. My goal was to finish in the top 10, so I wanted to be up towards the front to start, and really just hang with the group because I didn't want to get lost in the dark, navigating on cue sheets, not knowing where to go. So at all costs, I did everything I could to stay with the train and roll with the group as long as I could. So eventually, kind of 20, 30 miles into it, the two kind of lead groups were put together, and we're going at a pretty good pace. So I think that 20, 30 mile mark is where we kind of all separated. Then there was one point at that point within the race, there was a crash, two big pileup. No one really called out these sort of tracks in the road, kind of sandy, and probably 10 to 15 people flipped or fell over, including myself. And that's kind of where things got narrowed out a little bit more between riders. But luckily, nothing went wrong with my bike from that standpoint. I found two people, really, Kate, which I can talk more about later, and then one guy named Mitch, who were good at pushing the pace. So Mitch and I, it was a group of three that we were riding most of the night through together up until my first stop. My arm's getting a little tired here, holding up my phone. But anyways, yeah. So that was the part of the race, And at first we were cooking it, so I had to slow down a little bit too. But then it was really me, Kate, and Mitch leading throughout the night. So at one point, Mitch had to stop about 60, 70 miles in, so then it was just Kate and I, who ended up being the lead female later in the ride, until I got to my first stop about 80, 85 miles in. Quick grab my water, got some new food, forgot the Camelback. I took off, forgot my Camelback with water, just stupid kind of mental mistakes that way, but it was a long race, so got right back into it, didn't let it fluster me too much. Continued on at that point. I was leading to my second stop, and it was just Kate and I, the lead female again, throughout the ride. And I don't want to linger on too much with this conversation. I want to kind of keep it short and snappy for you guys. But at this point, it was a grind up until the next stop. And I think about 150 miles in, kind of turned light of day, which was nice. Had a nice tailwind throughout the ride. But at that second stop, Kate stopped a little bit before me. I quick ate a sandwich, a sweet potato pancake sandwich at that 150-mile marker. I took off, and I was kind of out on my own, and that was a point in my race where I didn't want to wait for Kate behind me. So I had to go and push, and I pushed for a good 60 miles or so on my own. So, that's where all the past training and long rides, solo rides on the weekend kind of pay off, because at that point it can become sort of a mental game. So I'm glad I put that time in beforehand to prepare myself for that. So after that 150-mile mark in, was going towards my next stop, which I think was about 210 with 30 miles to go. And at one point, Mitch, the guy I was riding for earlier in the night, ended up catching back up with me. And luckily, I had a partner to ride with me there for a short while until I got to my stop 3. And at that point, I kind of knew I was in the top 10. I think Mitch told me that. So at this point, when we were riding together, he was done with all the stops. I had one more at 210. So I had some energy left. I was feeling good. So I quick bolted off, got to my next stop, did a quick 1-minute change, not even, with my crew, and got my water and booked it. And at that point, I had more energy, and I had a lot in the tank left, compared to Mitch, who I just went for it, 30 miles left, and that became a long stretch. On that long stretch, probably the longest I've ever done before. Not in terms of, miles, obviously, but it was a long ride, long race. I was feeling good, but then all of a sudden, unending hills, 10, 15, 20 hills, just climbing, and it got to me. But I was still pushing pretty good and feeling pretty good. Had my music going, and all of a sudden this guy comes behind me, and like shit, he passes me up. I don't know how or where he came from, but that also encouraged me to give it a little bit more. So I kicked it in another gear, tried to catch him, got close, but then towards the end there, he just had a little bit more in the tank left than myself. But so yeah, then I got into Hager City and ended up finishing in 11th place in about 14 and a half hours. So it was an awesome race, awesome riding experience. The lead female, Kate, who I was riding with before, ended up being the top girl finisher in the race. So that was quite the experience to be able to ride with her. Just everything that went into it, the night riding, the gravel, the crash. My hands got really cold about 5 or 6 o'clock where I couldn't even tear off my cue sheets, or I couldn't even pick up food out of my top tube bag because my hands are so cold and they get numb. So that was one thing I didn't really prepare for or think about going into the race. But yeah, just to experience that, to know what it's like, to race an event like that for that long a time was awesome. And I think coming out of my third stop, my crew was cheering me on. My mom and dad were crewing for me, and Haley was there too for me, and they're just cheering me off. And I was just thinking back to all the time and effort and riding I put into this, and I got a little choked up, a little emotional. I'm like, hey, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to finish this up. And I did it. I got in 11th place. I'm super proud. I'm super hungry to continue to do more and get better though. So I know this is kind of long-winded video about the race and how it went, but just wanted to share this with you to kind of give you that inside experience to what a gravel race is like. Thanks, guys.